Welcome to the Condo Pod, presented by the Canadian Condominium Institute, Eastern Ontario's chapter, your go-to place for everything condos in Eastern Ontario. From governance to legal, from maintenance, management, and community living, we are diving into the topics that matter most to condo owners, directors, and professionals in our region. So today's guest sits in a really interesting intersection. He's both a teacher as a lecturer in real estate at Queen's University and is actively working in property management today. That combination gives him a perspective we don't often see in this industry. So welcome, Michael Chindota, to the Condo Pod.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate
It's
it.
a pleasure.
Appreciate it. So for those that perhaps have no clue who you are, do you want to just give yourself a brief intro?
Sure. Yeah, I can like a 3-minute summary
That's
and
it.
compress it really fast. Came to Ontario in 2012, 2013. I did my MBA at Queen's and I went straight into property management as one does. I worked with a partner together for 12 years or so, built out a condo management company, sold it, and went to teach at Queen's. And I've been teaching Queen's for about 4.5 years now, 4 years now. And I spend half my time teaching real estate at Queen's and the other half in industry at a property management company out of the GTA called GPM Property Management.
Right.
So half time there, half time at Queen's, 1 foot academic, 1 foot in industry. That's me.
Interesting. So, like, that's gonna you're gonna get a very different perspective because those that are doing, like, just doing and not teaching,
Right.
are constantly going to be. They're still going to improve their skill set. We have continued education responsibilities. Like, we're
Right.
still learning. But when you're teaching somebody, you're also going to get the perspective of somebody who has no idea what's going on,
Yes.
right? And they're going to challenge you
Yep.
in some instances to say, why are we
Yeah,
doing
why,
this
why is this important? Why are we doing that? Why do we have condo legislation? Right? Like
Right.
these kind of things
Right.
happen all the time.
So how does that dual perspective shape how you see the industry kind of overall?
It's, you know what? It's an interesting question to ask because I'm always going down to the very basics. What is a condo,
Mhm.
right? It's not a built form. It's a legislative structure. It's an ownership structure with shared responsibilities or with shared components, individual components. I'm always explaining that from the ground up.
Right.
I'm always explaining why we have legislation. I'm always explaining how the industry is moving and shaping. So it forces me to every semester go back to the beginning, explain it again. Go back to the beginning, explain it again.
Mm.
And it means that I spend a lot of time on the basics and I spend also a lot of time trying to stay up to date with how things are changing because I'm keeping on. I can't give someone 20-year-old knowledge, right? Because that's not why they go to university. So I'm forced to keep doing that.
Interesting. So, by pulling yourself back to those basics consistently, do you see something that doesn't quite hold up, like once it gets to real world value? Something that you're explaining to them from the basics, where it's like, we explain a common element, we can explain a exclusive use, all that sort of stuff. Is there anything that you've noticed that as you get into the real world application, it becomes a little bit more gray, less, by the book?
Okay, interesting. You know what? I actually don't spend that much time teaching condo.
Sure.
So my classes are designed around teach us real estate. Go. We have one class to do it. So I
Hmm.
look at it like, do I do property management? Do I do condo management? Do I do
Sure.
valuation? Do I do engineering? Do I do law? And I say to the students on the first day, I can't teach all of this to you.
Right.
So I have to pick and choose which parts I teach. So those parts that I teach, I try to teach those that will stay true regardless of what industry you're in, whether
Mhm.
you're in residential property management, whether you're in development, whether you're in condo management. So the pieces that will stay consistent and those that are applicable around the world. So I actually don't spend very much time on condo. I spend a lot more time on valuation because
Right.
that's how the real estate management and development industry looks at it, is primarily from a valuation point of view. How much is it worth? How much does it cost to build? How much can I sell it for? What's my margin there? And that's how I look at it. So I try to teach them the underlying theory most of all, because the theory is going to stay true regardless of when and how you're applying it.
Hmm.
So I just unfortunately don't have time to really get that deep into operating plans, right? And turnaround plans for shopping malls. I don't have that much time to get into all that.
Mhm.
So it's primarily the theory that was going to be true regardless of when and where you are.
Okay. So let's take it on the flip side then in the property management side of
Yep.
the world. You come with a knowledge base. You've been doing this for quite some time. Is there something you see as you bring on new team members that they learned this in academia
Yep.
and they're trying to apply it in that space and it's just not lining up properly?
Yeah, and this is a kind of good question to go down because there are lots of these things, and that's when the how it should be done meets the real world, right? So we should have 12 board meetings a year or 10 board meetings a year or whatever it is. But the reality is that sometimes board members don't want meetings all the time, or they want to take 2 months off for the summer or for Christmas, or here we do things a little bit differently.
Mm,
So you have these trained individuals coming out of schools and they're hitting the real world where they just don't want to do it that way, right?
mm,
We don't want to go get 3 bids for this. We want to get one or we want to get 17, right? And now you're trying to
mm,
explain to them why one is not enough and why 17 is too many, right?
mhm.
At 17, you're going to make everyone mad because they have a 1 out of 17 chance. If you have one bid, well, then are you getting the best pricing?
Right.
Right. So it's trying to, you have to take the students who come with this knowledge of how things should be done and trying to give them the leeway to be able to adjust to how the real world does it, but know when to kind of bring it in, right? Where it's too excessive,
Sure.
where the real world has too much leeway.
Sure. So you have your straight and narrow, you have the wobbly, and then
Yeah.
somewhere
And yes, somewhere
nice
in the
little
middle
sweet spot in
is
the
how
middle.
we want to manage, right? If a board member says, you know what, 2 is fine, well, maybe that's okay, right? But when they want to go to too many quotes, you have to
Mhm.
kind of rein them in, saying, listen, there's no point after 4.
Yeah, I remember I worked with one client once where we were doing it was a major project.
Yep.
So definitely want to have competitive bids. You want a proper tender process,
Yep.
ensure that you're qualifying these bids, all that sort of process. And they were like, okay, we want to take it on to Mercs and we want to go out to everybody, whether they're in Ottawa or in Toronto or
Right.
this. And I'm like, guys, like it's not going to be the right idea. You're going to get so many bids that get brought in. You're
Yeah.
not going to be able to understand who's doing what.
Yeah.
Like I don't know the players in the GTA to
Exactly.
say that this contractor has the not only the boots on the ground staff to be able to do stuff, but the back of office to make sure that their invoicing is correct.
Yeah.
Like I
And,
can't
and this is where
check
they're
any of that.
doing that is actually diluting your experience
Yeah,
because you could say, in Ottawa, these are the top 5,
yeah,
right? You can say that. But now when I force you to bring in 30 of them, you have no idea who's the top 5 in
correct.
Waterloo.
Correct. And they come in, half the price of all these other teams, and that's attractive,
Yeah.
right? As a board of directors that give this fiduciary responsibility, but you're also just a volunteer in most cases, and your skill set may not be towards
Right.
bids and all
Right.
that sort of stuff. Is there something that you see in the industry that's currently undervaluing academia?
Yes. Yeah. And I think we can get into kind of a larger discussion of what is the current state of training in the industry? How are we going through our CMRAO courses? What I think is being undervalued is managers with formal educations.
Hmm.
So, formal educations, and I think of college, 2, 3, 4 year programs or university bachelor's degrees, they're being undervalued in industry because they're not being recognized for their combination of hard and soft skills.
Hmm.
So if we compare that to someone who has kind of worked their way up through the industry, which is a very valid and it's a very respected way of doing things, but with doing that, you're missing certain things.
Hmm.
So when I think of an undergrad coming out of, let's say, a business program, and take any of them, they're all good. So coming out of an undergrad, they have courses in accounting, they have courses in finance, they have courses in HR, they have courses in law. So they have a deeper and wider base that they could layer on the condo specific knowledge afterwards. And those are the hard skills, but also the soft skills. They've been presenting for 4 years. They've been in front of
Right.
classmates and professors for 4 years. They have these soft skills of how to negotiate certain conversations.
Hmm.
So those graduates are not being recruited enough and they're not being valued enough to move into our industry. And where you really see this is not in like the first 2, 3 weeks, right? Because you're all learning and nobody knows anything in the first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But where you see the real differences are when they're a GL and you're setting them free. Go out and now you have your own boards. Now you're running your whole
Portfolio.
operation, your portfolio. And where you see that is they're coming back to you less, and they have better to their managers less. They're having fewer issues with retention. They know how to handle more sticky and odd type of situations and manage different personalities on the board. So there is a difference there between the two. And I'm in my limited way, I'm trying to steer our industry into looking at hiring more from formal education and bringing them into our industry.
So why do you think right now there's that gap? Like why aren't we going, like, in an ideal situation, like, I'm somebody that went through the grind,
Yeah.
started at the bottom and climbed up the ladder that way. Um why do you think that there is a more apt way for the companies or the boards or whatnot to choose that path rather than saying, okay, well, we would like, somebody with an MBA or a bachelor's in
Mhm.
business
Yeah.
who's going to have that skill set? Because I agree, like it would make my life infinitely easier if I had that skill set before having to kind of learn the hard way in some
Yep.
instances. Right. Like I've been, managing condos now effectively for about 6 years, in the industry for 7 or 8. Um, and I've had to learn the hard way on some projects that, oh, okay, this is why you do something this way. I've created my repertoire and the people around me to help support
Mhm.
that. But why do you think that's like, why aren't the people coming to condo management?
So I think this is two issues. This is the push and the pull.
Mm,
So the push is that students coming out of an undergrad aren't thinking of, let's start a great rewarding career in condo management.
mm,
It's not seen as a sexy thing. They're primarily thinking of asset management. They
right.
are thinking of, I want to work for Brookfield. I want to manage a portfolio of 10 shopping malls. I want to spend my time on Excel running numbers, and that's it, right? That they're thinking of that. They're attracted to brand name and prestige and not getting your hands dirty, if you will,
Mm,
by looking at spreadsheets, right? And spending their time doing that and managing large amounts of money, large mortgages, refinancings, working for pension funds. That's seen as like the sexy thing to do.
right.
So they're not really attracted to property management. They're not attracted to the fact that there's stability in the industry, the fact that you run your own schedule, you
Hmm.
have your own clients, and you have your own reporting that you do to your clients, and you're managing your own relationships. They're not attracted to that and a dozen other features.
Mm,
So that's on the student side of it. On the industry side of it, we are not, and I speak as a property manager, we are not going and finding them inside these schools.
mm,
We are not making a good case for our industry why we should be attracting these types of students.
mm,
So we're not going to career fairs. We are not putting together our own trade shows, right? We
mm,
don't have like CCI or any other group isn't going to universities or colleges and saying, here are 10 managers, each one has 2 or 3 hires to make. We need 30 hires. Come on down. We'll
right.
teach you about our industry.
And here's all the highlights.
Yeah, here's all the great parts about the industry.
Hmm.
Here's a list of who's in this room right now, who's hiring, right? We're not doing that.
Right.
So like we're not pulling them in. So it's a combination of the two.
Mm. So would you say that that's like a recruitment problem industry wide from your
Yes.
perspective?
Yeah, it's industry wide. It's
Yeah.
not Ottawa, it's not Toronto, it's all of it.
Right.
It's all
So I guess then, if you were to design the ideal pipeline from scratch,
yeah.
what would it look like? What would be the ideal world for, condominium managers coming up through whatever system that looks like? What's the ideal way?
So the way I'd like to see this is that we have our students who have self-selected into business programs. They're saying, I want to be in business. I like to understand money. I want to understand people. I want to understand accounting. I want to understand that. So they have self-selected into the business program, and they are constantly interacted with throughout their education. So let's say students in undergrad programs, especially in business schools, are always looking for summer internships. They're
Mm,
looking for something to do in the summer. We need to find, as an industry, a way of getting them into our businesses for the summer. They come to us summer of second year, summer of third year, summer of fourth year, or sorry, summer of first year, summer of second, summer of third year. So they
mm,
come to us for 3 summers. That's 12 years, 12 months of work they can be doing in our industry. So we need to get on campus and we need to start recruiting them and saying,
mm,
hey, do a summer internship with us. And by the time they graduate into a job in one of our companies. So I see it as academic, while they're starting to work in the summers in industry. And when they graduate, they're going into industry.
So they get a taste of it.
They get a taste of it. The ones that hate this industry self-select out, but the ones that like it stay back and come back into it. And during that time, they can be working on their courses. They can be getting their CMRO courses. They could be getting their hours, and they graduate. And then we have a couple years where they're finishing off their GL requirements. And what we have at that point is someone who has a couple years of industry experience, someone who has a formal education, and who is ready to move into a full portfolio manager role, but also has the capacity to take on more, right? When we look at regional managers, or we look at district, whatever your business calls them, they have the capacity to actually move into that role.
Because they have that skill set that's broader from the formal education rather than there. So how would the industry be unintentionally filter out these individuals? Like, I understand the concept, like we're not enticing them. We're not letting them know that this exists.
Right.
You know, I remember, and we've had this conversation before on the podcast, that most condo managers stumble into the role, or they're, you know, an administrator on a property, or they're part of the security team, you know, part of the concierge in some properties. And that's how they become aware of this situation. So how can we like still ensure that those individuals, because you know, self-promoting here, like I'm one of those people, so I don't want to wean that out, because there are going to be, you know, diamonds in the rough that can do those skill sets. So how do you bridge the gap then between the individual who has that kind of skill set and the high performing academia?
Yes. So I think that those who, let's say, started off at that, and it's the same thing in the GTA, same thing, you either start off as an admin, or you start off as a security or concierge, exact same model applies there. So those should not be looked down on in any way because they don't have that formal education. But let's come up with a way of helping them get that formal education, right? So can we give them, when I look at the CMRA courses, they are the very minimum legally required to be in this business.
Yeah, and they need some work in areas. They're good in some spaces. They taught me a lot, but I do think that there are gaps, not for today's conversation.
Yeah, that's a different day's conversation. But we can have them taking evening courses and weekend courses, and we can subsidize that as part of our business and helping them get through these courses. So what we're doing is that we are saying that no matter how you get into this business, we're going to give you the same skills, or make sure you have the same skills to be looking years in the future in your career. So I think that's one way we could be doing it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It would be up to, you know, obviously the businesses to have the resources to be able to do something like that, and the scaling aspect of it. So what would you say is something that a newly licensed manager is not prepared for when they first get started in the industry, with your experience?
There's a few things that they're not prepared for. One, and it depends on the size of your portfolio, the size of your corporations, the sheer amount of money involved.
Right.
So we have corporations with $1 million, $2 million budgets. We have reserve funds in the $5 million range on some of the upper end size properties. So they're not prepared for that size of that dollar amount.
I remember the first, when I first started, we were doing checks and it was an electric payment. And I remember the first time that I had a $10,000 check in my hand, and it was, you know, something simple. It was just like utilities. And I'm scared holding this $10,000 check. I'd never, you know, you can't imagine that kind of money when you're a kid getting started. So you're right. That first time you do the $1.6 million budget, you're going, oh my goodness. And you're doing this budget for, you know, 200, 300 families. And that's their biggest asset that you're dealing with.
And if you get something wrong on it, you're going to have 400 questions about it, probably the next day, probably a phone call. So it's the scale and the size of the industry, the amount of money that's involved. The fact that anyone coming onto your property to do work will be getting paid for that, but they're also incurring risk and liability to your corporation. So it's you just get hit by the whole thing that this is not, even though it might be 2 employees or 1 employee at that property, this is a full-on operation, and they're not prepared for that. These are really miniature businesses all in one, especially for the smaller properties, not really like a 20-unit townhouse complex, no. But I look at 100, 200 unit property, these are businesses. They are full.
Yeah, one of the things I always say to friends or colleagues when they first start kind of getting curious about condos is my perspective is that a condo is a non-for-profit business that you're buying into, and the perk is you get to live there.
Yeah, the extra added features
That's
you
right.
get to live
You're a
in.
shareholder, and
Yeah.
one of the perks they're going to give you is somewhere that you can live, and you get your own market value on it. So
Yeah.
take care of it as you
So
will.
they're not prepared for that. They're not prepared for the frequent interaction between the industry and lawyers. They're not prepared for the things that you need a lawyer's opinion on and the things that don't. They're not
Mm.
familiar with working within the bounds of a licensing framework. There's certain things I can and can't provide advice on
Mm.
because I am limited by that. So they're not used to the sheer size and scale and complexity of this industry. And I think that applies for regardless of how you got into this industry, you just kind of get hit like by a bus. You just get hit by it and you realize, oh wow, this is a real operation.
Yeah, the industry is definitely a sink or swim mentality for managers as they come in. That's something that I've heard repeatedly from managers that got in just around the same time as I did or shortly thereafter myself. Would you feel that that's something that's kind of a curriculum issue with like I don't want to call it the CMRO. That's not the point of the conversation. But would it be a curriculum issue or is it an expectation issue from the client or employer?
Oh, that's a good question. You know what? There has to be components of both in it. And I
Right.
think we can also bring in like their underlying education before that as well. So from the employer side, there's no real soft way of bringing you into this industry other than just shadowing someone for 2 months.
Yeah, you can bring them onto some smaller properties in some instances, and I'm not going to say that smaller properties are always easier because
No.
there's definitely ones that we have that are 15 units that can be very challenging. When you get smaller, every dollar
Right.
means something. You have to change the roof; it's divided by 12, not by 100.
Yeah.
So it's a very different conversation. So yeah, sorry, go on.
So that's on that side of it. We can do more with the required education for
Mm,
sure. We can also do more with what skills are we expecting them to come into the industry with, right?
mm,
What underlying college or university education or previous experience from their other industry? What are we looking at?
mm.
Because when we are hiring from that security role, that is typically someone who's coming to us without a comprehensive background
Right.
in something in business of some way. In some cases we do. In some cases they pick that up very quickly, but in lots of cases they don't have a background in accounting.
Hmm.
They have no idea what a GL is or general ledger. I don't want to confuse it with general licensing,
Right.
but they don't know what a general ledger is. They
Yeah.
don't know what a profit and loss is. They don't.
I'm going to tell you one small thing. For the first, I would say 4 months, because I started with, I think I started with law when I did my courses, then did building sciences, and people kept saying GL code, GL code, GL code. And I'm like, why are there so many general license codes? And then I did the finance course and was like, oh, general ledger.
There we go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So a great example of
Yeah.
not coming in with that base knowledge out of an education system.
Right. So there's I think a lot we can do, and our industry has been maturing, has been forced to mature really quickly over the last 10 years.
Hmm.
We've matured more in the last 10 years than over the 50 before that,
Hmm.
because now we're forced to have licensing and regulation, which I think absolutely is something that the industry needed.
Hmm. Yeah, it was
And
described as the Wild West
it,
before.
the Wild West, and I read about the Wild West. That was a scary place.
Sure.
So I don't want to live there.
Yeah, though there's some good stories from some of the senior managers that I was able to get mentorship from before 2015 and the act that brought in the responsibilities of the manager
Yeah.
and all of those other pieces. So very interesting there.
What does protecting people's buildings mean to us? It means having a deep understanding of your building, taking proactive action, and empowering those who manage it with the tools and insight needed to make well-informed decisions. Our technical expertise is grounded in condominium management practices, ensuring our services align with the realities of shared ownership and day-to-day operations. We consult, we deliver, and we are driven to help condominium communities thrive.
I guess one of the things from my perspective, like, don't get me wrong, I love learning things. I think that's why I really gravitated towards condo management, is
Right.
it was like there's all these different facets of the industry that you can lean into and learn, and there's always something new. But how much of this role can realistically be taught versus learned through experience?
Okay. So you obviously can't teach the whole job. You can't teach the whole job in courses because you
Hmm.
can't replicate that board dynamic of someone of you're sitting across from a president and you explain to them that they need to do a $10,000 special assessment for each owner. Right?
Hmm.
You can't you can't replicate that very easily. So there are certain things that have to be picked up by experience. I think there's more that you can do in education than we're currently doing,
Hmm.
but you can't go all the way. At the end of the day, a lot of this industry, a lot of it will be based on that experience. But what we can do is have more of a mix between the education and the experience. We can have, so the summer internships program, that's a way of, and by the way, I didn't make that up. Like engineering uses it, finance uses it, accounting.
Legal uses it. Yep.
Right. They do it all the time for this type of industry. So having you jump back and forth lets you get your experience and then bring it back to the class and then build on that experience and then go back out to industry and build on your classroom knowledge, right? It weaves the two of them together. And that's why so many different industries really like this kind of model.
Yeah, I could see it also really benefiting the condominium manager industry, because you're going to get that feedback from those people in the education part of the system,
Yep.
right? You go, back to school for a semester, and then you come back for that summer internship, and all of a sudden you're able to identify things that don't make the same sense as they did in the classroom.
Yep.
And as long as you have the right environment, you can now challenge
Yep.
these norms.
Yep.
Okay, well, maybe the way we do chargebacks in the industry is a little weird, because financially and on the books and how we want things recorded and
Yep.
all those sort of things, maybe we should switch it up, because this is how we learned it in this particular, module in class.
Right. And on the other side, they come back to me in my lectures and they say, yeah, Michael, I tried that last week or last summer. It did not work. You got to
Right.
fix this, right? So you get, the academic side gets that feedback from the real world.
Right.
Yeah, I went to the board and I told them this is what the special assessment is. And they looked at me and saying, you did not explain this well,
Mhm.
or this is not going to work.
Mhm.
This is like, right. You get that feedback going both ways. And I think that will over time create a stronger set of managers in the industry.
Mm. So do you see in your, like, on the horizon, something where the education becomes more specialized, or does it stay in that broad spectrum and you bring in that aspect to the condo, right? Like, do you foresee an ideal world where you have a condo manager program where it's very specific to that, or is it more ideal to have that kind of greater, the conversation I had with Jerry Bordeaux in a previous episode, link in the show notes to go check that out. We talked about the condo manager today needs to be the generalist aspects and everything.
Right.
Whereas it would be ideal if we can get into those specialists category. Similar idea. So do you envision it somebody with a bachelor's in business or a master's in business that then, sharpens the blade into condos, or something where you have a very specific program like they've developed with the CMRAO, but a little bit more expanded upon?
Okay. I see the former model where you go get your broad, comprehensive education that you can apply to a lot of different things.
Mhm.
And then you sharpen that with CMRAO specific courses, saying these are the 4, 5, 6, 10, whatever number of courses that ends up being in the future. I see that deeper, wider base that can be applied to lots of different walks of life, that can be applied to work in lots of different situations, and then sharpened specifically with the relevant legislation, the relevant reporting requirements of our industry.
Great answer. I think everybody will like that one.
I say that having hired from lots of different places and having
Yeah.
I've taught at the university level, at the college level, and okay, I've not taught at the primary school or the high school level. So I've taught in two different types of post-secondary, and I think this is the best model for the future of the industry.
Hmm.
This is going to, like, there's the risk of hyper specializing. If you know only one thing and very well, how do you know how to do the next thing,
Mm.
right? I hear this sometimes saying, oh, this is a fantastic surgeon who knows how to do this, but they don't know how to file their taxes,
Right.
or they don't know how a mortgage works, right?
Right.
So I'm against hyper specialization. I like having a generalist base who has picked up the specialization in their area, but still has that big base of knowledge that they can rely on.
Yeah, no, completely understand that. In conversations we had before today, we talked about some of the gaps in things like human resource, conflict management, and finance as a broad spectrum. Which one do you think is probably one of the most critical gaps that's being overlooked in the condominium management world?
Okay. Look, I think the conflict management is a good place that we can chat about there. It's hard. It's hard to train. It's
Mhm.
hard to put you in an adversarial situation. So
Mhm.
it is possible, and you can do it, but it is difficult to do well. So I have this professor. His name is Shea Doobie. He's a former instructor of mine. He's a former teacher of mine at Queen's, and he still teaches at Queen's. And he has a course on conflict and negotiations. And what he does in the course is he actually pairs them up and gives them challenges of, you have to negotiate this with someone else.
Mm.
And he gives them like show notes of, here's how you're going to prepare for this. Here's your persona. Here's who you have to adapt.
Mhm.
So he's trying to create that conflict and have you practice negotiating it. And it's all throughout the class. So this is a
Mhm.
semester long class. So you're probably out there negotiating 20 different things.
Mm.
So you have, and he builds into it conflict of like, you are taking the place of a customer who has just received a 50% price rise, and you need to argue your way out of that if you can, right? So he creates adversarial situations. Like, so we could be doing more of that kind of role play and that kind of training. It is, I will definitely admit, hard because you can't emulate the emotion behind it of, I have a special assessment that I've just received as an owner, and you, the manager, need to present this to me of why I have to pay for all this. So
Mhm.
it's hard to do all that. So anyways, that is the conflict resolution is one of them. The
Before you jump into the next part, one of the things that we had done that was successful in the past was mock AGMs.
yeah.
So we have the manager prepare for the AGM, they put together the package, and then they come to the meeting. And the seasoned managers that have been through
Yep.
those zones, we'll
Yeah.
call it that, are now the owners in the audience,
Yep.
right? And so, for example, we would get to a meeting and I would make a motion right at the beginning. Can that happen? Can you do that? I'd make a motion that the board has to leave the room, right? Things where it takes you off of that,
Off the prepared script.
prepared
Yes.
script.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing to mention. I've done the same thing now that I think back about it. And the first, I say, by the time you get to your first AGM, you will have done 10 mock AGMs with me. The first one, I'm going to be very nice to you. I'm just going to listen politely and follow your instructions. And then over the next 10, as you get better and better at this, I'm going to start getting more and more pissed off of an owner. I'm going to start throwing issues. I'm going to start doing all these kind of things. So the training, and that it works great. It really does. And I've gotten that feedback from my team saying.
But I do think that it would be nice that if there was something in the whether it's in the CMRIO courses or in some more formal positions where there is that sort of pressure, because that is probably one of the more challenging aspects of the role. I say a lot of times, well, we all say it, but whether it's good or not, is that the job would be a heck of a lot easier if there just wasn't people involved.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It was just buildings. Yeah.
Correct. It was just, the mechanical systems, the finances, 1 + 1 = 2, except for when you need a special assessment. That would make things a lot easier. But the reason that we stay in the industry is the people. I like working with the board of directors that are trying to better their communities, really striving for it. I have my list of owners that I really enjoy having conversations about their day-to-day, knowing about their families and becoming part of those community pieces. I guess like one of the things we talked about, like not getting into, hyper specialist. And I would agree there. I mean, if I only did one thing and forgot about all the others, it would become a bit of a problem. How can the management companies, broad, because each one's going to have its own way of doing things, take what we've talked about today and apply it starting Not as soon as tomorrow, but what's
next week
yeah,
or next
yeah,
month.
exactly.
So
The day after tomorrow.
yeah, yeah. So having going through what does it take to have the skills to be, let's say, a regional manager, work from there. Your GLs should be trained to be regionals at all times. You should be training them to do that. Your limited licenses should be getting the training to become GLs, and your admins should be getting the next level above. Everyone should always be aiming for that next level above. So we should be always providing that training. And it's not always the training of, this is what you have on your plate today, let's deal with it, but more of a, this is the theory of an AGM, right?
Right.
This is this is how you read a budget and how you prepare a budget. So we should be offering this type of training to those who don't need it yet, those who will need it a couple of years from now. So by the time they actually get to it, they already know how to do it. So I'm imagining a annual calendar of, in January's, I'm always teaching about this, right? In summers, I'm always teaching about budgets, right? So have like an annual calendar, and there's turnover in our industry. So you can offer these things once a year, and every year you're going to have someone new who needs to learn these things. So it's more of a internal training calendar where whoever wants to, or you can mandate that everyone takes it, shows up and starts taking these kind of courses through you. So you're going to run them through the process of how to create a budget, how to create this. A couple months before AGM season, you start running everyone through, let's do AGM refresher again. And those who already are very good at it, they still have to come, but now you give them a specialist role.
Right.
You're going to be a board member, or you're going to be an adversarial owner, right? So that constant annual training calendar and that's how we keep skills modern. That's how we keep skills fresh. That's how we remind those who haven't done an AGM in 6 months of how to do AGMs.
No, that's very good. Okay, so when we talked about your past life, your past experiences, and how you kind of grew your first kind of management company up through acquisitions, and then eventually sold off to become a father. Very exciting part of life. What experiences did that teach you about the industry? Like, obviously, by having your own and then acquiring others, you would have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes. One of the things I learned is that there are so many different operating models, right? There are models where you have like a more of a community type of vibe where you have managers working together as a team. We have more flexible vacations. I know your firm is like that, where you have a support team. There are those who are individuals where you are your ownership. If you don't do it, your ship sinks. That's it, right? So there's that side of it. There are companies that specialize in very large properties with on-site teams. There are companies that specialize in portfolio management, right? So there's so many different ways of working it. There's so many different ways of setting up a work order ticketing system, or setting up your accounting office. How do they do it? Do you have the managers do most of their accounting? Do you have an accounting? So there's so many different ways of piecing together a management business, and lots of them are viable. There's lots of different ways of building a business in this industry. So I realized that as I was looking and doing the due diligence on these acquisitions, so like, they operate in a completely different way than we do. Can I buy this? And one thing I learned very quickly is it's not so much it's not so much how the company is now. It's more what is the potential. So if your managers were to all leave, do you have a system to bring in new ones, right? Do you have that continuity? Do you have the systems in place? But it's also, so it's not just the systems, it's also the managers. So these managers, can they adapt to a new way of doing accounting? If I give them a new piece of software, are they just going to freeze and fall over? Or are they going to say, okay, cool, give us the training, I'm happy to do it?
Right. Are they going to adapt and make the changes?
Right.
Or are they going to get stuck in the mud?
Yes. So there's the business itself, the company itself, and then there's the individuals within that business. You have to look at both of them, because if one of those two is off, you have a big problem on your hands when you're looking at buying it. So then there's also the strategy of which businesses are trying to grow in one city only and have a high concentration, which ones are trying to spread across with a lower concentration in each city. Where are you doing why? How are you keeping your costs in line? So it's such a fascinating industry because there's so many different ways of running a business properly.
Yeah, I guess I knew that, but I never really thought of it from that perspective.
Right.
Because something like a restaurant yes, they're going to have different operational things, but a lot of that is going to be copy and paste to be in that successful aspect,
Yes.
right? There's so many restaurants that you can, bar rescue or whatever, the guy,
Yeah.
he comes in and just, okay, copy and paste this and
Yep.
then we'll fix some of those issues. But you're right, in the condominium management industry, especially because it is still pretty young, hasn't really knocked off some of that, like, I don't want to say dead weight, but some of the inefficiencies that may exist. What did you find was one of the harder things when you would go through that kind of growth and the acquisition and trying to make some changes that you thought were perhaps more efficient, more cost effective? What were some of the hardest things to overcome there?
One of the hardest challenges was inappropriate pricing.
Mm,
When you have a corporation that's paying $20 per door, but they are commanding $40 per door services, and you have to look at them and you have to say, I either have to raise your costs or you have to find somewhere else because
right.
I can't possibly run this business and giving you the service that you expect.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at this, and the board is entirely nice, they're entirely reasonable, they're great people. They're just getting more service than they're paying for.
Mm-hmm.
And if my business is to provide you that service, you have to pay for it appropriately. So that's one of the hardest things when you're looking at a business and you have this owner who's looking to sell their business and they say, I think it's worth this much. And you look at it and say, no, it's not. It's not worth that much because you, the owner, are working 80-hour weeks.
Right.
I can't bring in someone at your salary.
Yeah, you're in that treadmill stage of just constantly being able to just go, go, go.
Right.
You're not looking at it from a scalable aspect. You're just in that kind of, I don't want to say ma and pa, but you're in that very
Yes,
beginner stage.
you're in that size
mindset.
where you're doing everything yourself. And
Yeah.
you're looking at this, and I'm running the numbers on this, and I said, if you were to leave, and I have to hire 2 people to replace you,
Mm-hmm.
the profit that you think you're making disappears.
Right.
This is now not a profitable business. Why would I buy it from you? So there's the acquisitions I had, which is about 7, and there's the due diligence I did on 20-something businesses.
Yeah.
Where you look at it as like, this is not a business. This is a job that you own.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very hard job
Yeah.
because you're not
I
paying
think,
for it enough.
when we talk about this quite often from the manager's perspective of really identifying the role as a condominium manager as a profession. A lot of times there's the stigma of, it's just property management, glorified superintendent,
Yep.
things like that. Like, you're going to hear me say that a lot of times on this podcast. But when the legislation started to come into place, we talked about the Wild West.
Yep.
Wild West is gone.
Yep.
There are due diligence markers that we need to hit, and we need to make sure that you as a corporation are hitting, whether that's compliance, fiduciary responsibilities, maintenance. There was those horrific incidences down south in the States where the condos, ceased to exist
Yep.
because they weren't being taken care of properly. The skill set that's required, that requires some education to get there, needs to be treated as a profession, which means that the time that I'm spending on your condo is no longer letting contractor 1, 2, 3 in the door.
Right.
That's not what I'm doing.
No.
Maybe some days I go and I'm definitely
Yeah.
providing access and doing some of those pieces, but the professional aspect that I need to bring to these communities to protect them is definitely undervalued. It's something we talk about all the time. And I agree that condos, board members, owners, the industry as a whole should be looking at their management team. And if it's not the right team, switch it up by all means. But looking at their management team as a resource to utilize the same way they do with legal counsel,
Right.
Or their engineering firms, or those specialized contractors that know roofs better than anybody else. Why do you think, and if you don't have an answer, that's okay, but because I'm springing this one on you for sure, is that why do you think that condos have been undervaluing the manager to this day?
I think your opening sentence made this clear, is that there's a conflation of the super and the admin and the manager.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm teaching, I have one class that I teach on property management. The first slide is a picture of Mr. Trigger, if you watch Friends, or Remy, if you watch New Girl.
Mm-hmm.
That is what people think of as a property manager.
Mhm.
That's not a property manager. That's one, a stereotype, and 2,
Mhm.
of a superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
So of someone who is just on your site to fix keys, open doors, letting contractors. These are two different jobs. So we as an industry need to focus on differentiating ourselves. So this is why, right, on your business cards, you put in GL,
Yeah.
right? You put in the fact that you have your license. This is what we as an industry need to be educating our owners of the training involved in becoming a general licensee. So we need to be pushing on that. And we as an industry need to be elevating our managers and showing that, no, this is someone specialized. This is why they can't provide service next Friday because they're at a conference. And by the way, we will give you service in a different way with a backup system, but our GLs need to be at a conference, right?
Yeah. Continuing to learn, continuing to sharpen that skill set.
So there's a big thing that we need to do as an industry to educate and elevate our owners about what a manager is and what they do. And this also feeds into my teaching when I could say, no, I'm not advocating for you guys to become supers. I'm advocating for you guys to become licensed managers with education requirements, with continuing education requirements, with legal requirements. So it's very much us presenting ourselves as an industry and us presenting ourselves as individual managers as being something different.
Yeah, so I want to touch on the individual manager as well. I think that it's very important, like for those that are listening to the podcast, that are, perhaps board members, and they're going like, oh my goodness, like, we're going to push this. If the fees on managers are going to go up, and they're just trying to become, lawyers when they're not lawyers, etc. Is that the individual manager needs to take some of that accountability as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the sense of elevating the product is what I'll call it.
Yep.
Is that, I as a manager, when I go into a board meeting, an AGM, heck, when I'm meeting with a contractor, I have a sense of responsibility. I have a sense of due diligence and making sure that I'm doing the best for that corporation to the best of my ability, and trying to provide a level of service that's above what would be the preconceived notions of what a I said superintendent, what the preconceived notions would be of a condominium manager. A lot of times we talk about it to, our team members internally, and I talk about it to colleagues, like, you're a condominium manager. When somebody calls you a property manager, politely correct them. I'm a condominium manager. I'm not a
licensed condominium.
I'm a licensed condominium manager. I agree that there needs to be this industry-wide pickup of the manager and provide that level of professionalism to that. But I want to be very clear that it's also up to the individual manager.
Yes.
To treat each scenario and each owner with a level of respect.
Right.
That you are not, you didn't get in this profession to be able to lord over anybody. It's to be, the forever professional that's there to help every single person.
Right.
One of the things that we say to our clients all the time is that I am here to help every single owner the same way that I would help a board member. And I tell my boards this: if an owner calls me and says, how do I get rid of the board? I will tell them the step-by-step process on how they get rid of the board, because I'm there to support every single owner.
Right.
Not just the board of
Very
directors.
good. No, I love that. That's
but every manager, my opinion, needs to take that same responsibility to their client.
Yeah. And I think of other ways that we can do this in terms of, as an organization, to provide some of the, let's say, the evidence or the support structure for it. So it could be as little as having headshots on your website of your GLs and saying this is their licensing and this is their training, this is their education, right? Focus on that. When you are introducing a new manager to a board, your regional or your president should be coming in, and instead of them just showing up and say, hi guys, I manage your building now, we should say, I'd love to introduce you to, this is Joshua. Joshua's been with our firm for this many years. He's a general licensee. This is his experience. This is his education, right? It needs to be warmed. The crowd needs to be warmed up a little bit to understand who they're dealing with and who they have the honor of working with. So there's certain things that we can do as an industry or as individual management companies to support that. And even training of, how do you sit, right? Do you sit slouched over like this, or do you sit like this? Are you dressed in your PJ hoodie, or are you dressed in a nice polo or a nice shirt? Are you
Business casual is fine.
Yeah,
Most
business
condos-
casual's fine.
You know, if you
Yeah.
got that hoity-toity client, then throw on a jacket.
yeah. This right now, this polo is my default. of
That's
how I
right.
dress.
That's right. This is my go-to shirt.
Yeah, this is the go-to shirt. This is the go-to. I think I have 7 copies of this.
Yeah, exactly.
So some sort of standard around how do you dress, how do you speak, how do you present yourself, right? Having that, and these are the intangibles, and these are one of the things that I go back to. Business school teaches you, right? I kid you not. I had a class on how to shake hands. I had a class on how do you shake hands, right? You take the web of your hand, you aim it at the web of their hand, right? And
Right.
like that.
Right.
So these are the intangibles of being a professional, right? How do you wear a suit? How do you tie a tie, right? Which button do you put? Do you
For the jacket, do you
close on your
close?
jacket, right?
Yep.
Business school teaches all these things, and for 4 years, they're giving each other presentations or giving me the professional presentations
And getting a rundown from the professional, the teacher, the lecturer, the professor.
I literally had a professor going to me and saying, Michael, both of your buttons are both of the buttons on your jacket are buttoned. The bottom one should stay unbuttoned. Here's why.
Right.
So intangibles, right? The things that are not wearing your jacket properly does not mean you're a professional, but most professionals will know how to wear their jacket properly. So they are associated together.
And these are social cues that also come to, downstream. And as when I go into, for example, an AGM, like I want to make sure that the owners feel confident that the management team supporting their community has a understanding of how to do certain things. So yeah, I show up, proper. I'm there for the meeting.
Absolutely.
I'm minding my P's and Q's, always in that professional stance. So I think that if there was a mechanism, if that's, the bachelor's in business or master's, et cetera, and that's a skill set that can be then transferable into the industry to elevate the professional, I think that would be fantastic. Listen, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure that there are many other tangents that we can go down.
Sure, absolutely.
But we also want to respect the listener, and I don't want them to have to feel like this is the 4-hour podcast that some others do on the world. CCI is always trying to bring out education. That's the big mandate of CCI, especially Eastern Ontario's chapter. We're really trying to get the people that understand condos, understand the industry, to you, the audience, and have an opportunity to engage and get some comments there. So please feel free to comment on the video. Let us know some stuff that you'd like to talk about, whether there's something that I should have brought up to Michael that I didn't get a chance to. We can always bring them back for future conversations. For those that are listening, Michael, how can they find you?
They can find me on website, trindota.ca. I bought my own domain name, so I can do that. Or find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Michael Trindota on the planet. So if you search that into LinkedIn, you will find me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Joshua, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning into the Condo Pod, your source for all things condo in Eastern Ontario. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and share this podcast with your fellow condo community. For more resources and upcoming events, visit us at ccieasternontario.ca. Until next time, stay informed, stay connected, and keep your community strong.